and it hits me right in the gut. Wham! And I'm like, oh, I felt that. Ooh, and it burns something inside of me, and it changes me. God, purify me and give me transformation. I don't want to stay the same.
That's right.
I don't want to see things the same.
That's right.
Back at the beginning of the year, God had told me this is the year of consecration, a place of separation. I'm separating. He's drawing a line between black and white, and there is no gray any longer.
That's right. It's a difference.
He is defining and setting the tone. And we're going to choose one or the other, because there ain't 39 choices in between the black and white somewhere.
Right.
Despite what the world says. Despite a community of people that want to tell you something else because they don't want you judging them. Let's talk about pride. It's a sin.
That's right.
There's nothing godly about pride. You know what pride is? Pride is shaking your fist in God's face and saying, I know better than you do. You may have created me, but I am my own God. That is pride, honey. And everyone who stands with it is doing just that.
Amen. Wow.
That's truth. And you can paint a pretty little rainbow on everything and say you're being tolerant. But let me tell you what you're really doing is shaking your fist at an almighty creator. Because you decided you know better than he does. Honey, he didn't give us 39 choices. He gave us 2. And what you choose determines the outcome. Don't get mad at God for the consequence of what you put in your vase. If you stuck stones in it and it breaks, it's your fault. There are consequences that were set before any of us were ever born. He set sowing and reaping in place. It was the original, we always quote it as a money verse. It's not a money verse. The Bible says, God will not be mocked. Whatsoever you sow is what you reap. It's a farming verse. You know what it is? It's the planets. They spin. And as they spin, they throw off their waste and pick up what they need. He set things in place before we were ever here.
Right.
What we sow, we will reap. If you sow in the flesh, you're going to reap in the flesh.
Oh, yeah.
And if you sow in the spirit, you're going to reap in the spirit.
Oh, yeah.
You may not like what God chooses, but this is what he gave us, life or death.
Right.
And if we choose sin, the Bible says we die. Well, I can live what I want. I'll live a good life. Really? Somewhere you're going to die.
Yeah.
Whether it's a physical death, an emotional or spiritual, but you still die.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what a spiritual death is? Without God.
Ooh. Yeah.
I read that Wednesday night. That's a scary place to be. If you've served your flesh all your life and you leave for eternity, what are you going to get all eternity? Yourself. Most of us can't handle ourselves much. Can you imagine if that's all you have for eternity?
Right.
Because that's what you chose. We love to blame it on the devil. Oh, it's all the devil's fault. He made me do it. There is nothing that we've been tempted by that none of us are not tempted by. And yet the Bible says we're given escape. And the Bible also says we're not given excuse. The gospel is written. Heard somebody say one time, well, what about cultures that have never heard the word? The Bible says nature itself tells the story of creation. Nature itself tells the story of the gospel. In Joel, they didn't have Job. Job was the first book written. The story actually took place before, or just after Noah, or before, something like that. And it was the oldest. And Job didn't have a gospel, you guys. He didn't have a Bible. So how did he know about God? Where'd that come from? What he had was the gospel and the stars. What he had was what God had shown him. We are without excuse. You could go into another culture and they'll tell you about a God. They may not know his name, but they know things. We are without excuse. And we are really without excuse when we're in a culture where we can have 2 Bibles per family. Maybe 1 a person. And we're without excuse when we have the Word right in front of us. He gave us choices, you guys, but there's consequences. The Hebrews traveled in the desert for so long. Probably the sun got to their brains a bit. They got a little sun exposure. And they got a critical spirit, and they got bored. That's why they made a golden calf and worshipped it, and then called it Lord. That word Lord is Elohim. They named it God. I knew God was angry at them for building the calf, but I never knew why he was so angry until I read that Aaron called it Lord. And then I went and looked that up, and I thought, oh, Jesus. The very first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And thou will not make any graven images. And they broke 2 right there. Wow. Yikes. The problem I see with the Hebrews a lot in the desert is that they got a critical spirit. The problem I see in Americans is we get critical. We are angry at the fact that God only gives us 2 choices and we want our 39 flavors or 31 flavors. Nothing really measures up to our standard, so we have a lot of pride. We're insecure. We think, well, insecurity, pride, which one? Just surprisingly, they go very hand in hand. Most of the time, people that are very insecure are incredibly prideful. They use the pride to hide their insecurities. And we're selfish. And we're rebellious because we want it our way. But God, it's my way, not yours. Don't you dare tell me what to do. But is he Lord?